beautiful orchard. It's magnificent.
We're pleased with it, yeah. It's a great place. It's a complicated story. We bought this piece of land in 1992, having dreamed of an orchard and a small holding and thought about it for many years. We actually bought a piece of land, a much bigger piece of land than we wanted, because we only wanted an acre, but when a piece of land came up that was affordable, that was near us, it was 9 acres, but with a bit of a hard swallow and a trip to the bank manager. Actually, the bank manager turned us down for a loan. We went to the co-op and they lent us some money. We paid it back ahead of time, and we have as much more land than we ever wanted for apple and fruit growing. Originally we started with apples and a few plums. Later on we put some pears in because our customers wanted them. But we didn't need all the land, so about 5 acres has gone down to fruit. The remaining 4 acres is coppice and the trees on the horizon, for example. Those are poplars, as indeed are the trees here. We planted these as a windbreak, but they're very pretty. They're just generally adding to the carbon sink and air purifying properties of the land. These poplars we planted, I think it was 1997. We got them from Buckingham Nurseries, and I think they were about 47 pence each. And they came through the post in a bag, delivered by the postman. We stuck them in the ground, and every one took and grew magnificently. I haven't measured the height of these, but it must be well over 60 feet, and they're huge. Yeah. Huge, great trees. They're as thick around as me. Some are thicker around than me, which is saying something. And anyway, so the second year we simply took some cuttings. We took some cuttings from these and stuck them in the ground at the far end of this field, and they all took. So it's amazing. So it's not just an orchard, but it's a piece of land which we try to care for. We don't sell our fruit anymore. We took our apples, pears and plums to the farmers markets for about 12 years altogether. But during that time, sales went down a bit, our expenses went up, and we were getting older, we were getting aches and pains, and so, after going to the trouble of growing the trees, we'd spend a lot of time on Saturday picking and grading them, and then we'd get up at 6 o'clock on Sunday morning, drive to the farmers market. At least a quarter of the time it would have been raining, and set up, sell our fruit for 4 or 5 hours, go home again. And when we counted our money up, we found we'd basically paid ourselves the minimum wage for selling the apples and nothing for growing them. Yeah. So, in some way, almost the last straw. It wasn't exactly the last straw. Well, 2 things in particular. One, we were selling the juice as well, because you pick apples. I mean, for example, we've got a variety called Sunset. It's a beautiful apple. It's from Kent. It's a cross between Cox's Orange Pippin and some other apples. There's a lot of Cox Orange Pippin crosses around, because the Cox, many people would agree, when it's grown well, it's a beautiful apple. There's no apple that's got a more balanced, aromatic, sweet, lovely flavour, but it's hard to grow. So they're always trying to grow a Cox seedling, which is easier to grow, and Sunset's one of those. It's a lovely apple, it's self-fertile, and it's quite a small compact tree. It's a good tree to grow in a small garden, but it goes soft very quickly. That's the problem. It's soft and soft. If an apple goes really mushy, then it's not very nice to eat. But if it just goes from being crackling, crispy, hard, crunch when you bite into it, to being slightly tender, I would call it, tender or fondant, which isn't the same as going mushy. A lot of people say, "Oh, I only like a hard, crunchy apple," and so they wouldn't eat it. So we have sometimes boxes and boxes and boxes of Kids Orange Red, Sunset, various other apples which have gone slightly soft. Nothing wrong with the apples at all, but they were a bit soft, so we couldn't sell them. So we juiced them. We juiced them. We did on the Saturday before a market. We'd juice them, put them through the machine, and we'd take a couple of kegs of fresh juice, and we'd sell it. We'd have a taste of it. Oh, I saw that! And all year long, we saved up the 2-litre polythene Coke bottles, because our daughter Sarah drank a lot of Coke, and we saved the bottles up and washed them. And so we'd sell it. We'd sell, I think, a pound a gallon. Not a pound a gallon. What am I talking about? £4 for half a gallon. Pound a pint. Anyway, one day, a female person waddled up to our store, got out in jack boots, riding crop, iPad, and slapped down a load of paper and says, "You're not allowed to do this unless we've given you the food hygiene approval, and you're not allowed to reuse polythene bottles." So I said, "Well, I'm sorry, we can't spend thousands of pounds to meet your requirements, so we'll have to stop selling our fresh apple juice," which you were selling it with labels, raw apple juice, pressed yesterday from, we only ever sold on Sunday what we pressed on Saturday, from picked and washed fruit, not pasteurised. Drink it straight away or put it in your fridge or freeze it, because otherwise it'll start turning to cider, which won't do you any harm, blah blah. So anyway, so our customers said, "Oh, can I have some of that lovely fresh apple juice?" "No, I'm sorry, busybody from the food police came along and said we're not allowed to sell it unless we do all of this stuff which we can't afford to do." So that took us from making a modest profit to barely breaking even at the farmers' markets. There was another time, and it sticks in my head, was a group of people, a lady in her 70s and a couple of younger people in their 40s probably, and they stopped and looked at us and pointed. We had about 8 different seasonal apple varieties. Orleans Renette, Kids Orange, Red, Pitmaster Pineapple, Sterner Pippin, lovely old English apples. Oh, isn't that interesting? They're doing all the old-fashioned varieties of apple. Isn't that nice? As if we were an art exhibit paid for by the Arts Council or something. And then they strolled on without buying any. Now, they didn't have to buy any. They didn't have to buy any. That was fine. There was plenty of Golden Crunch apples in the supermarkets, probably less than we were charging. But in the end, we thought, look, we've had about enough of this, haven't we? So we had to disappoint our loyal customers and packed up. We thought, okay, so what are we going to do with the orchard? We put 20 odd years of love and effort and money and sweat and injuries to my left hand from various cutting tools. I nearly took the tip of my left ring finger off once with a secateurs that I'd recently put a razor edge on. Couldn't play guitar for 6 weeks. But it's in the end, we can't just sell this. If we sell the orchard, we didn't need the money from it. It paid us back well over what we'd invested in it. But if we sell it, a rich guy will buy this. They'll bulldoze the apple trees. They won't even turn them into charcoal or anything. They'll just pile them all up and burn it all with diesel and put some stables up for their horses. Nothing against horses, nothing against rich people particularly. And then somehow wangle away to get planning permission to
housing,
a nice big house, and make a lot of money and move on, and that will be the end of our orchard. So we thought, well, blow it. We'd rather keep. To be quite honest, we'll keep it. My wife's got an art studio. I've got a writer's cabin. We can come out here and have a bonfire, have a barbecue, invite friends out there. We can make some cider, even if we don't make any money from it. I mean, thankfully, we're amongst the doing all right for money. You're always talking about the very rich and the very poor, but there's an awful lot of us in the middle. Particularly if you've worked hard for 50 years and been careful with money, you don't have to worry too much. We'll hold on to it, please. We'll just hold on to it. Maybe make some cider and some perry, and just enjoy being out there and think of it as a carbon sink and a wildlife reserve. As you can see, the grass has been let go a little bit this year. That's partly because we've had a few issues, look after relatives and this, that and the other happening. So we haven't been managing the grass quite as well as we usually do, but the butterflies love it. There's a lot of butterflies. We have a number of what I call friends of the orchard, people who come around here. There's a guy, retired civil servant, as a mate who was here with us yesterday. He just likes to be here. He gets a bit of exercise. We've had a few people over the years who we've got to know who said, look, I need to get some exercise. I don't want to go to a gym, so can I come and help you when you're doing something? We've had various groups out here. We had biggest number, we had about 160 people out here once for a wedding anniversary. We had a bouncy castle which we powered off of a generator. Yeah, I could if I could get if I was to get my act together and try a bit harder, I could probably produce some award-winning artisan cider from
Definitely.
here. I mean, cider. The story of cider has been told many times. It's an older drink than beer. I don't know why all of the. I'm not making fun of anyone here, particularly all the eco campaigners and the people who say we must consume less carbon and we must save the earth by we must conserve fossil fuels. You know, I'm not against any of that, and I certainly think we should conserve fossil fuels, whatever we do. Some people say use none, others say use less. We need to use some for now anyway, but beer consumes a lot of energy. It's a lot if you're making beer. I've got nothing against beer,
Especially if you're importing it. And
well, exactly. So yeah, but to produce beer, first of all, you need good quality agricultural land. You need expensive, heavy machinery that burns a lot of diesel. You need to plough that land, harrow it, put the seed in, and then you need to spray it. You can grow organically, but you won't get the yields. That's another big story with different views on either side. But anyway, so you've got to harvest your. I've got a lovely painting by a guy called Gordon Lees, which shows I think it's a gouache painting or acrylics or whatever. Shows a very old-fashioned scene of a whole village, you know, men, women, boys, and girls harvesting a field by hand, which is very picturesque. But you know, it wore you out. You know, you'd have to retire with arthritis by the age of 45, and nobody wants to do that sort of hardline agricultural work. So you need a combine harvester, which costs about £500,000 to buy. Burns a lot of diesel. So okay, so you've harvested your barley. You then got to dry it out. Okay. So then most barley goes into biscuits. It goes into animal feed. A lot of it's goes into beer. Now to turn barley grain into beer, you first of all got to turn it into malt, which is quite an energy dense process. You've got to soak it, warm it up, keep it at a certain temperature, and then dry it out completely. So you're using energy to grow the barley, you're using energy to convert the barley into malt, and then when you make your beer, you've got to crush the barley, and then you've got to soak it in hot water at about 70 centigrade for an hour and a half, then run that water off, add the hops, and then boil it at not just to sterilize it, it needs to actually boil for 90 minutes with the hops, and then you've got to cool it down, and then you ferment it to make beer. Now, to make cider, you plant an orchard, largely leave the trees to themselves. You don't need to spray. We don't spray here. We haven't sprayed for 10 years. Now, if you don't spray apples, you will get a lot of pests on them. You'll get maggots and scab and stuff like that. You can manage that to a certain extent. I don't want to go off on that because it's a long conversation. But the apples produce fruit. When the fruit is ripe, you crush it. You probably do use some energy. I mean, we use a very efficient Briggs & Stratton petrol-driven generator to run a centrifugal press, which will crush the apple and will turn the apples into a fine pulp. We then use a hand-operated device, just literally physical force. I need the exercise to turn the pulp into juice, extract the juice from the pulp, and then you ferment it. So I haven't seen a calculation done, but the amount of fossil fuel you could in theory, I don't think you could run a combine harvester on solar energy or wind power. But the amount, if you want a drink, if you want a medium strength, long alcoholic drink to drink by the pint, between 4 and 8% alcohol by volume, then cider's your drink for sure. It's not going to save the planet, but it'll certainly reduce our need for carbon. Anyway, sorry, I've gone on and on and on.
It's great for the YouTube community to hear, and I'm really interested to hear from you. You're a really interesting guy, so you got a lot to say. And
life is interesting. Apples are interesting. A recent friend of the orchard is, I won't say her name, but a lady artist who got to know my wife through a group that they both involved with tangentially, and you know, can I come to your orchard, do some paintings with portrait? She's absolutely dumbfounded by the beauty of it. It's a rough beauty, but it's very natural and very, a mixture of cultivated and wild, really. It's almost like a wild garden, if you like. Oh, you've got so many butterflies. Oh, that's a peacock butterfly. Oh, that's a this, that and the other butterfly. So she's come out here and painted and painted and painted. Just found it very inspiring. Yeah, I mean, I've even taken up watercolour painting because I'm so inspired by the beauty of ripe apples in all of their many different varieties. I mean, this is not efficient. I remember I used to do a lot of YouTube videos. Somebody from Poland posted to say, your orchard is not very modern. And I said, yes, my friend, it is not. You're correct.
Deliberately.
You're correct. The modern orchards, which I don't know if they deserve the name orchard really, where you plant, you've got about 1,000 trees to the acre, and they're all planted along post and wire systems and fully supported. They're pruned by a slashing machine that goes down with, you know, whirling blades, rather than properly prune it by hand. It just goes slash, like a hedge slasher sort of thing. The trees are so close together that you're going to get fungal disease, so they manage that by heavy duty spraying with fungicide. And they produce weights of apples per hectare which were unheard of in the old days. Unheard of. I mean, I've got a big collection of books going back to the 19th century. I say nothing of facsimile books that go back to the Middle Ages of apple growing, and they used to be aiming for maybe 10 tons to an acre, and that would be very difficult to achieve, but you know, 5 tons of apples per acre would be a good success rate. I don't think we've ever quite hit that, but nowadays they're getting you're getting well in excess of 15 tons per acre, you know, sort of 30-40 tons of fruit per hectare. And that with the modern systems of planting very dwarf trees, very large numbers of trees, stapled to post and wire systems, very heavy intensive production methods, they are achieving very high yields of apples. But you know, if you try biting into any of them, well, they're crunchy. The modern apples that you get, they're crunchy. They sort of taste vaguely of apple. They're sweet and a bit like, rather like a tin of mass-produced lager beer. I won't name any brands, but you probably guess which brands I might be referring to. It's exactly, wherever you are in the world, whatever time of year it is, it's always exactly the same. I mean, I will not eat a pink lady apple. I'll go hungry, have a glass of water rather than eat a pink lady apple. Braeburn, I don't think much of. Granny Smith, I detest. But these particular apples were genetically created for the benefit of the producer, not for flavour, but to be uniform in size, to be hard in texture, to be able to endure mechanical handling, so that they could shave a few more percentage points off the cost of production by handling apples mechanically rather than by men and women. But I can see I'm not trying to preach a sermon here. You know, I can understand why folks do that. I mean, who wants to earn the minimum wage doing hard agricultural work? Not many people anymore. Anyway,
lovely.
I talk too much.
It's okay. It's interesting. Thank you.